Phineas and Ferb is uncancellable. Well, okay, I know it was cancelled, but you'll know what I mean soon enough. If you're a fan of any kind of TV show, the worst possible news you can get is finding out that it's been cancelled, meaning no more episodes are going to be produced. And while there are a lot of shows that have at least been allowed to plan ahead and work towards a natural conclusion for their story, it's not a privilege many cartoons are getting nowadays. See, this is a problem plaguing animation lately, especially with Warner Brothers and Netflix, who have been not only cancelling a lot of their series as of recent, some even before they managed to be released, but have also just been flat out wiping certain shows off the face of the earth like Final Space, which has been taken off HBO Max, DVDs are going out of production, and they're even going as far as to removing it from Amazon Prime, even if you've already bought it. You like Final Space? What? No you don't? What's Final Space? I've never heard of that. You're crazy, man. This is why indie animation is so important right now. You should all go and check out the Boxtown Indiegogo page and donate to it if it piques your interest. Me and by a lot of folks I respect a lot, like some people who worked on Clarence. You all know how much I love that show. Although, despite all this, every once in a while you get a show that becomes so big, so popular and ingrained in the public eye, that it somehow manages to rise above the rest and become uncancelable, no matter how much you're told that it's finally stopping. Of course, there are the obvious examples like The Simpsons, Family Guy, or South Park, series that have been going on for an upwards of 30 years and show no signs of slowing down. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the shows that you hear are stopping production, and a big deal is made about their conclusion. Everybody huddles together and sings Kumbaya over the death of their beloved cartoon, and then 2 weeks later it's brought back like nothing ever happened. Like Jesus, they have risen once again. Off the top of my head, Adventure Time is a very good example of this. With the show having initially run from 2010 to 2018 with a whopping 10 seasons under its belt, with it ending its run with a large climactic conclusion that ties up all the loose ends it had been building up to, with a finale that most fans were pretty satisfied with. Then 1 year later it was announced it'd have 4 more specials that aired throughout the next 2 years, and when those were finished it was picked up for a spin-off series by gender-bent versions of the characters. No one's ever really gone. But there's one cartoon out there which I think takes the cake for how much studios are never willing to let their profitable IPs die. And that show is Phineas and Ferb. As you're probably all well aware, Phineas and Ferb was a show created by Don Povenmire and Jeff Swampy Marsh that aired on Disney Channel back in 2007, and while its 4-season run may seem short compared to a lot of other long-running series, it becomes a lot more impressive once you realize those 4 seasons took 8 years to air, with a total of over 200 episodes, which isn't even counting all the special events and crossovers and movies. But despite having ended so long ago, 7 years, Phineas and Ferb have managed to stick around, popping up pretty frequently, whether it be through spin-offs, small cameos, or literally invading other shows. I soon came to realize that no matter what, Phineas and Ferb isn't going anywhere. And so today I want to discuss how Phineas and Ferb managed to become one of the only cartoon series today that I deem uncancelable. But first, if there's one thing I'd never want to cancel, it'd be a subscription to Bespoke Post. This video is sponsored by Bespoke Post. Bespoke Post is a monthly membership club delivering epic boxes of top-shelf goods from under-the-radar brands. Every month, their members are introduced to cool new products from outdoor gear to home, kitchen goods and clothing, all based on a quiz you fill out. Each box has around $70 worth of goods inside, which you can get for a fraction of the price. You can even preview the box before it's shipped out to you, and you can decide to either keep it, swap it for another, or hey, if you're not a fan you can skip it altogether for no charge at all. I'm a big fan of the Weekender box, coming with this amazing durable and stylish bag that's great to have when you're on the move, and also this Over Easy box, containing helpful tools and ingredients to make breakfast with, like an iron skillet, a leather pot holder, Bloody Mary mix, pancake mix, and maple syrup. You got a whole dang meal right there. So to get 20% off your first box, click the link in the description and enter code LSMARK at checkout, or go to bespokepost.com/LSMARK. And thanks to Bespoke Post for sponsoring this video. For a long time, Phineas and Ferb was the shit. Everybody talked about it. I recall bonding with kids in my primary school purely for our love of this show. I even had a Where's Perry lunchbox. That's how you know I was one of the cool kids. It was a show that featured the titular Phineas and his stepbrother Ferb, trying their best to seize each and every summer's day to their fullest, inventing creative contraptions with their friends, all while their older sister Candace tries to bust them to their mother.
Funky dog head, bitch.
And while that's going on, their pet platypus Perry sneaks away all day to fight crime as a secret agent against the evil Dr. Doofenshmirtz, who aims to take over the tri-state area. I really loved this show. It was my only reason for ever wanting to switch from Nickelodeon to the Disney Channel. I always enjoyed how it managed to engage me despite almost every episode following the exact same formula. Through the fun designs, charming characters, and consistent bangers, floor after floor is forever stuck in my head. I think the hype for it peaked around the release of its first movie, Across the Second Dimension. The show was no stranger to doing big special events like Summer Belongs to You, which may have just been my favorite one in the whole series. But the movie promised to be so much more. Each and every day my friends and I would go into school, only 4 more days to the Phineas and Ferb movie, only 3 more days, 2 more days. Oh boy, it's fucking tomorrow. And I gotta say, it fucking delivered. It took the show in a completely different direction than ever before, with the mind-blowing reveal of not only Phineas and Ferb finally after so long meeting Dr. Doofenshmirtz, but also finding out their pet was living a double life this whole time, where Phineas is uncharacteristically pissed off for a majority of the runtime, although he does take the occasional break to gleefully sing about ice cream. I began to drop off from it around the end of the 3rd season. There wasn't really any reason in particular, I just kinda stopped caring. From what I've seen, the show still did keep up a certain level of quality, even if it was starting to become apparent that they were running out of wacky inventions. Like an episode where all the potatoes in town go missing, and so they clone a potato chip which fuses with one of the kids' DNA and creates an army of potato gremlins, which is also an insult to be flung towards me. Go right ahead, I give you permission just this once. Despite being so episodic in nature, the series did manage to have a proper conclusion to their characters. And not only do we have a time skip where we see them finally decide to conclude the will they won't they thing with Phineas and Isabella, but also with Dr. Doofenshmirtz saving the world from the brink of destruction and deciding to use his mind for good now. You know what? Pretty solid end to one of the greatest cartoons of the 2000s and 2010s. Glad they knew when to call it quits and not run it into the ground like a lot of other shows around the time. Hell, a lot of people would even say Adventure Time did just that. Full transparency, I've never seen that show, but I hear folks say it went on for well longer than necessary. But I'm happy Phineas and Ferb was able to avoid that, and can finally rest in peace. I was at least hoping they'd wait a year before bringing it back. So nearly 5 months after the last days of summer, the series finale, the show miraculously returned with the 1-hour-long special The Alka Files, which did not focus on Phineas and Ferb actually, instead solely being about the adventures of Perry the Platypus training a new batch of secret agents, with one being Dr. D. There's also this subplot going on with 3 tiny bug characters who were, funnily enough, supposed to be a recurring 3rd member of the original series, most likely cut because they're not very funny. Psst, I know that's not the real reason. I was making a joke. This is heavily rumored to have been a backdoor pilot, in the hopes that viewers would respond well enough to the special for Disney to see potential in greenlighting it for a standalone series. If you still don't understand what I mean by this, or if it's a fairly common thing to do for a show, it's surprisingly not. Remember that episode of Fairly Odd Parents where we sit down and watch the 22-minute Crash Nebula episode of Timmy, but for some reason, instead of a buff superhero like he's usually presented as, it's a Danny Phantom-esque kid who goes to a space school where there's a surprising amount of world-building set up? Yeah, that was one too. Butch had wanted it to be its own series and was hoping this would make fans want to see Nick greenlight it. Didn't work. Now this wouldn't have actually been the first time Dan and Jeff attempted to do this, with the first being a previous episode from season 4, Doof 101. Which features Doofenshmirtz teaching a high school science class for community service, as the same bug characters from before try to go on a quest to communicate with humans. Yeah, neither of these were very popular. I think it was clear from this point on that Dan and Jeff weren't getting the Phineas and Ferb spin-off they had been hoping for. And with that, they moved on to their next endeavor, Milo Murphy's Law. Milo Murphy's Law was a brand new animated show airing this time on Disney XD. And if you know anything about Disney XD, much like the Nicktoons network, it's where the higher-ups send their shows to die. Milo Murphy is a kid voiced by Weird Al Yankovic, who has the unfortunate existence of constantly being affected by Murphy's Law, which claims that whatever can go wrong will go wrong. But despite all this, Milo still has a positive outlook on things and never lets this curse bring him down. Even though fans of Phineas and Ferb seem to really enjoy this show on its own, I think it's safe to say many preferred their previous work. Not thinking it's bad or anything, actually quite enjoyable, but still not as good. Me personally, I think what deterred me from it were the designs. It's a very common complaint, but they simply look like background characters from Phineas and Ferb, not the stars of their own show. It managed to run for a decent 73 episodes, but a lot of fans wish it was given the chance to go on longer, believing that the main reason for its supposed failure was through Disney's lack of promotion, which according to Jeff is something Disney themselves had apologized for. Although that is nothing new for them, I'm still very pissed they killed Wander Over Yonder and refused to give it a 3rd season. Assholes. I mean, just for comparison, the premiere of Phineas and Ferb was watched by a total of 10.8 million viewers, while Milo Murphy only scraped in just over 300,000, with none of their episodes even reaching 1 million. But other than that obvious detail, I think what really hurt Milo Murphy is that it failed to create any form of its own identity. Not just through the art style, which seems almost unchanged from their previous work, but also mostly through its integration of the Phineas and Ferb cast, with the two shows taking place in the same universe. Not only did they have a full-on crossover between the two, where we find out that they both live on opposite sides of the time, not only do we learn that Dr. Doofenshmirtz is the future inventor of time travel, which results in 2 employees for the Bureau of Time Travel needing to find him, as he does something that later results in the takeover of Earth, in an episode that I'd like to point out is called Fungus Among Us, which SpongeBob also did. But they then end the crossover with Dr. Doofenshmirtz crashing on Milo's couch, and no, that isn't a one-off gag. He continues to appear in the show in like 14 more episodes. They even bring Perry the Platypus and his daughter Vanessa back for a couple of them. And while I'm sure for fans of both shows this must have been a really fun inclusion, I think in the grand scheme of things it caused a lot of outsiders to be confused, which definitely wasn't helped throughout how many times the show would simply reference Phineas and Ferb out of the blue. When your series is so obsessed with the past instead of focusing on building itself up, how is anyone meant to care and look at it as its own thing? A small reference here and there is fine, but if it's at a point where certain parts of your show confuse me because I haven't seen an entirely different show already, then that's kind of a big issue. If you want to do more Phineas and Ferb so bad, then just fucking do more Phineas and Ferb. Oh, god damn it! The final episode of Milo Murphy's Law aired in 2019, with the continued hopes from fans that maybe someday it would be brought back for a 3rd season. Wait, fuck that! Phineas and Ferb is coming back! On August 23rd, 2019, it was announced during a Disney convention that a new direct-to-Disney Plus movie would be coming out soon called Candace vs. the Universe. Is that actually what it's called? Let me look it up. I think it's actually called Candace Against the Universe. Okay, wait, it's actually called Candace Against the Universe, but I was thinking of Scott Pilgrim. Fans everywhere rejoiced at the return of their favorite series, as I stood from a distance confused as to if it ever really went away in the first place. The film released the following year in August of 2020 to glowing reviews, with many finding it to be a very enjoyable standalone movie to the show. Me? Well, sure y'all know how I felt. Okay, so Candace Against the Universe isn't a bad movie by any means. I mostly made that title because at the time I figured despite feeling it was just a little below average, most people would just take that as me saying that I hated it, and so I made it seem like I hated it. Not the brightest move, I'm aware. Looking at it now over 2 years later, have my thoughts changed? I'd more so say they've eased. I still wouldn't say I like it by any means, for a lot of the same reasons I brought up there, being the inconsistent animation, which I know is unfortunately due to things needing to be done remotely and the switching of studios animating it, forgettable music for each song except the final one that I liked a lot, and not really having much for the characters to do other than Candace. I don't feel like the tension built between her and her brothers was done very well, due to the first act being fairly weak. Like, she reaches her big breaking point with them on one of their most tame inventions ever. And while I think the scene of them coming back together is done well with her remembering at the end of the day that she loves her brothers, I don't feel like they did a very good job at building up to that. If Candace Against the Universe came out in like the middle of season 3 of the show, I probably wouldn't have batted an eye, but for what was meant to be a grand return, I wasn't all that interested. Anyway, sorry, this isn't about that movie, I can't help myself. After this movie came out, things have been pretty slow for Phineas and Ferb. I remember when it released out there, a lot of folks were hoping that this meant the series would be coming back for a revival, but no. Since then, the most we've gotten that's been released is them appearing in this new Disney thing called Chibi Tiny Tales, which features all of their cartoon universes colliding into a singular chibi universe with mini silent adventures. Oh boy. Safe to say this is not up my alley at all. I don't really see myself checking these out anytime soon, but still, they appear there, it counts. Most recently, Dan Povenmire released his new cartoon for Disney, Hamster and Gretel. And while I haven't seen that show and don't really intend to, I watched the teaser that came out a while back and it seemed seems to be following in the Butch Hartman style of creation where the title comes before the concept. Tough puppy, like a tough puppy. Hansel and Gretel, Hamster and Gretel, there we go. The rigged animation really hurts it. I'm sure it looks better in the final show, but the look of it is quite ugly, especially given that the main designs are somehow an even bigger downgrade from Milo Murphy's Law. There's also the pacing issue. We're in a show about a little girl and her hamster being given superpowers from aliens. I would have thought that'd have taken longer than 2 minutes to establish the characters and give them some kind of reason for any of this instead of the alien just being like, alright, you two have powers, okay, bye. There hasn't been a full-on crossover yet between Hamster and Gretel and Phineas and Ferb, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's coming, given their previous lack of restraint and them already establishing that they'll once again take place in the same universe, with the official poster even hinting at a figure that looks very much like Dr. Doofenshmirtz. If he comes to invade another one of these shows, I swear to God. But at this point, are we ever going to see Phineas and Ferb return? While it's unclear if they'll ever bring back the show for a true revival series, which at this point I don't even think is the best idea, with the biggest reason of course being that the show ended just fine, let good things end. And even then it was evident they were running out of steam near the finale. But there are still hints of it coming back in other ways. Most recently, it was confirmed around the time the Candace movie came out that there were already talks for a potential third film, which if true I could see coming around 2024. But even if that plan never manages to come to be, I think it's clear to everybody that no matter what, Phineas and Ferb will never die. Albeit in a lesser way, much like SpongeBob and The Simpsons and so many other series, Phineas and Ferb has achieved immortality, and will return time and time again for many years to come. Strap in folks, because it seems like this summer still has a good few years left in it.